Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's My Journey webinar, Crafting Your Creative Future, College Admission for Artists and Performers. My name is Candace Lytle, and I'm your host for this premiere event in our My Journey series. I'm so excited to have you here, and on behalf of everyone at ACT, thank you so much for joining us. We're also so honored to be joined by our incredible expert speakers tonight from Collegewise. Belinda and Christopher are amazing, amazing presenters. Before I turn things over to them, though, I need to cover some essentials to help you enhance your viewing experience. You're going to see several widgets and tools on your screen. You're in control of these. They're resizable and movable, so you're welcome to move them around to get the most out of your screen space. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can use the Q&A engagement tool, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the webinar. We'll also likely have time for questions at the end. A copy of the slides is available in the Resources tab, as well as some other handy items to accompany this presentation and for you to reference long after it's over. The webinar will be recorded and sent to the email address you registered with within 1 to 2 weeks. And for the best viewing experience, we encourage you using a high-speed and stable internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause issues. If you're struggling with anything, check out the help tool at the bottom of your screen. And if you need a refresher on any of this, there is a helpful webinar viewing tips and reminders slide on the screen below that will remain visible throughout the entire webinar. If you have any issues, you can click on the On24 Help button at the top of the screen. Okay, I'm ready, and I hope you are too. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our friends at Collegewise. Here you go, Belinda. Or Christopher, sorry.
No, it is me, Belinda. Hi. Yes, I'm Belinda Paris. I'm the Director of Partnerships at Collegewise, and I have the pleasure of working really closely with fantastic organizations like the ACT and schools around the US to help bring Collegewise's college preparation and admissions expertise to as many families as possible. So thank you so much to Candace and everyone at the ACT for inviting us to be here tonight, and thank you for such a warm welcome. So we are really excited to dive in. As you all will be aware, tonight we're going to be looking at college admissions for students pursuing the arts. Our amazing college admissions counselling expert, Christopher Logan, will be providing an overview of some of the most important factors that you need to be thinking about in your college application journey, so that you can hopefully leave this session feeling really, really confident with the next steps to put in place there. Okay, so in a moment, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Collegewise, so you know why we are the experts on this topic. But first, we want to learn a little bit more about you so that we can really tailor what we're talking about tonight to who we have here with us. So I'm going to launch a quick poll. It's open now. And the question is, who is joining us tonight? Are you a parent or guardian? Are you a student? Maybe you're a family joining together, or maybe you're an educator. All are very, very welcome here today. So I'll just leave that open for a little bit longer. And make sure you hit submit when you're done. Okay, I'll just wait for a few more moments. Wonderful. Okay, so it looks like we have 43% students. Got 30% parents and guardians, 17% students, parents and guardians, and then we have about 10%. If somebody was adding up, it's actually 9.2% of counselors or educators here. Okay, amazing. We have a really nice mix. Christopher will make sure that he provides information that will be helpful for all of you. Okay, so a little bit of information about Collegewise. And I'll start with our mission. So Collegewise is a college admissions counselling company with a very strong philosophy to be the most trusted source of expert advice to help students access the transformative powers of higher education. There is a lot of noise out there in this space, and it can be really hard for families to know who to trust. So we are here to be that source of truth for families. We do research, we publish papers. In fact, Christopher has published several, and we attend conferences so that when you come to Collegewise, you know you are getting the most up-to-date information to help your students experience a less stressful and ultimately more successful journey to their great fit college where they're going to be successful and happy. So what does this look like? Well, there are three main ways that we help families. So the first is that we offer hundreds of free resources, including many webinars like this one, ebooks, guides, white papers on really every college admissions related topic that you can think of. In fact, we actually recently published our annual guide to the Common App that we developed in partnership with the Common App. So feel free to check that out on our website, along with a whole other load of free resources, including several that Christopher has written. The second way that we help families is that we provide college admissions counselling for students. And again, that spans pretty much every component of the college admissions process, including college application strategy, leadership and extracurricular development, time management, soft skill guidance, tutoring test prep, research and internship support. And I will not keep on listing things, but everything that you can think of that would be necessary to apply to college, we do those things here at Collegewise. And we have a range of offerings to suit various needs and budgets. Okay, then finally, we also do a lot of work with schools to provide resources and workshops to supplement the amazing work that's been done by school counsellors around the country. And again, that ranges from a whole range of free resources to paid options as well. Okay, so I think that's enough about Collegewise for now. So with that, I am going to hand over to Christopher.
Hello, everyone. Apologies in advance. I do not have the same delightful accent that Belinda has, but I'm Christopher Logan. I'm a Collegewise Master Counselor. I'm a counseling team lead. I am also one of our heads of thought leadership, which means that I do a lot of the publishing that Belinda's been talking about. I spend a lot of time researching college admissions trends in the college admissions marketplace. Spend a lot of time talking to admissions officers, former admissions officers, current admissions officers, and I go to a lot of the conferences that Belinda was talking about. I'm actually lots of Collegewise counselors are actually all flying out to Columbus, Ohio tomorrow for the national convention for college counseling. I will not be at it because some offense intended, it's in Ohio and I didn't want to go to Ohio this September, but lots of my colleagues will be there and I will be getting information I and my colleagues will be getting lots of information from the national conference. But that's a little bit about me. I'm just basically giant college info nerd. But what you're actually here for is to hear a little bit about, well, a bit about the college options for students with artistic interests. And so quick rundown of the agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about the various disciplines, programs, and degree types that are available, that are predominantly available for artistically inclined students. I'll talk a little bit about the factors that you and your students should consider when deciding what type of program, what type of degree to pursue. I'll talk about how the application actually looks, how you should go about preparing for it, and how you can really stand out on the application. And then I'll give a little bit of nuts and bolts information about scholarships, financial aid, ways to fund an arts degree, or even if it's not an arts degree, an arts-related degree, and also some information about some of the hidden costs that people often don't realize are associated with an arts-type degree or an arts-focused degree. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the most common disciplines in the fine arts. Now, the reason I say most common is that I don't want any of you to be fighting with me offline. These are not necessarily the only disciplines in the fine arts. These are just the dominant disciplines in the fine arts. So music, music covers instrumental, vocal performance, composition, music production, even music technology often. And then there's dance, which it'll be ballet, modern, jazz, hip hop. Apparently, we've all decided recently that choreography is a type of dance. For some reason, it almost never includes ballroom, and as a former ballroom dancer myself, I take umbrage to that. But there's also theater or drama, which this is one of the ones that can be a little bit more confusing because theater and drama can be what people often think of in terms of acting, musical theater, but it can also be directing and stage production and some of those related fields that aren't necessarily on stage. And theater and drama we separate from film and media arts because acting can go into theater or it can go into film, depending on the school. But the film and media can be acting, or it can be things like filmmaking, cinematography, animation, screenwriting, and even those related disciplines. And then there's the visual arts, which are the more traditional arts, things like drawing, painting, sculpture, photography, graphic design, all of those types of things. Sometimes animation will actually go into the visual arts, not to film. So as you can probably tell here, there are a couple of different overlaps where it can depend on the school, can depend on the program you're applying to. But it's not just that the disciplines differ, it's also that the types of degrees you can get as an arts student or an arts inclined student differ. So I'll talk about the different degrees, and then I'll also talk about the different programs. There's actually gonna be a little separate. But first, it's the types of degrees. There's the BFA, which is the Bachelor's of Fine Arts. This is that's the broad category essentially of an arts degree. It's typically an intensive professional degree that covers a lot of practical training in the fields like theater, dance, visual arts. So a BFA is truly, it is primarily a performance degree. It's about their BFA programs are typically very audition focused or very portfolio based, and they're typically conservatory style training. So it's immersive. And the bulk of the coursework in a BFA program is actually about honing the craft. So there aren't a lot of like gen ed requirements. A BFA degree doesn't often come with lots of, well, I mean, maybe if it's a writing program that you're in, but BFAs typically don't come with a lot of coursework that's not directly related to your specific craft. Then there's a BA, which is a bit more of like a standard degree. It's a Bachelor's of Arts. There's the two standard, again, I'm using air quotes for this, but the two standard degrees are the BA and the BS, Bachelor's of Arts, Bachelor's of Science. I will clarify, Bachelor's of Arts doesn't inherently mean it is an art. I have a degree in math from Yale. The degree in math from Yale is a Bachelor's of Arts because at its upper levels, mathematics is philosophy. A political science degree is typically a Bachelor of Arts. An arts degree from Columbia or from Yale or from UCLA is typically a BA, a Bachelor of Arts. The arts in Bachelor of Arts typically means a Bachelor of the Liberal Arts. It doesn't actually mean that it's inherently going to be an art. But a BA it's a typical liberal arts degree and you can major in an arts discipline like music, art, or theater. The main difference between a BA and a BFA is that a BA program will combine your art study with the broader general education. So you're still doing the more standard college curriculum. It's just that your major happens to be an arts discipline. You also often have the option to double major if you're doing a BA program because you'll be at a school that offers non-arts disciplines typically. And then I only have one hyper-specific degree on here because it's the most common specific degree. It's the BM, the Bachelor's of Music. That one's like a BFA, but it's just specific to music. It's a professional degree for like serious musicians. It's all about performance, composition, music education. The BM isn't the only specific art or music isn't the only art with a specific degree. It's just that the BM is the most common specific degree. There are more specialized options like the BDes, the Bachelor of Design, the BMU Tech, which is the Bachelor of Music Tech. And because some people consider this an arts degree, there's even like the BArch, the Bachelor's of Architecture. I will say, I am not saying that architecture is an arts degree. I am saying that other people say that architecture is an arts degree. Argue with someone else, not with me. I am just putting it out there that there are several other arts-specific degrees, but that's just a bit of that. That's a bit of the layout of what the degree options are. The next thing I want to talk about is the types of programs, the types of schools. So I talked a lot about how the BFA and the BM or the BArch or the BDes typically are hyper practical and they're focused on honing your craft. It's most common that those types of degrees, those art specific degrees, will come from what's called a conservatory or a standalone art school. those are specialized institutions that focus pretty much exclusively on arts training. So that's like going to music school, going to dance school, going to theater school, not majoring in theater, but going to theater school. And for those, think Juilliard, think Curtis, think the Berklee School of Music in Massachusetts, not University of California, Berkeley. Berkeley, Berklee, the Berklee School of Music. Those, oh, it's on the screen. But those are arts schools. Those schools typically provide an immersion experience. Almost all classes are related to the arts, and there don't tend to be a lot of liberal arts requirements for those at those universities or at those campuses. The environment is often highly competitive, especially because all of the students there are artists. They're also very competitive for getting in. Those tend to be very, very audition or portfolio based. Those are often the types of programs that are turning out more of the world-class performers in their categories because they largely emphasize performance and practical experience over the academics. Now, on the other side, there is majoring in an art at a liberal arts college or a university. And that's also a very, very reasonable way to go about it. Tons of universities and liberal arts colleges have strong arts departments or even their own art schools at the university. And sometimes those art schools will offer a BFA or a BM or even a BA. But one of the main differences is that studying in an arts program at a liberal arts college or at a university does give students a bit more flexibility because it allows the student to get intensive arts training within the broader college experience. So, for example, a student might pursue an arts major, either for a BFA or a BM or a BA at a university's art school or in their art department, while also taking classes like business classes, or like a student could be a student at UCLA or at any UC, for example, and not UC's only, but a student at any university could major in art, but still be pre-med, for example, because pre-med isn't a major, it's just a set of classes that are required by the American Board of Medical Schools. But there's a lot of flexibility that comes with being at a university and majoring in art. One of the main differences, though, is that you're not as hyper-focused on honing your craft. So that's the main trade-off. It's a double-edged sword. There's a cost, there's a benefit to each way. Conservatory-style programs are often, well, they are much more focused on the art. Those are, again, the ones that are more often churning out world-class performers. Whereas the university program offers more academic breadth, which can also offer sometimes a more flexible degree. The BA is often a more flexible degree because it's a more traditional college degree. And so a BA even if it's in art or in any field, in dance, in theater, et cetera, it's still a BA, it's a traditional college degree. And so there is potentially more flexibility with the BA. Now, there are lots of things to consider when choosing a program. And some of those things are things I just mentioned in terms of what is your focus. Is your focus honing your craft? Is your focus getting a broader education, et cetera, et cetera? But a couple of the things, just when you're looking at specific programs, one of the things to look into is the faculty and reputation in your field. I'm emphasizing the in your fields because that is often something that people look way beyond, and it is very easy for people to get really caught up in the US News rankings of colleges and to think that that's the only reputation that matters and that is the letter of the law and that is the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, whichever holy book you choose to follow this week. People think of that as like truly the law when it comes to the reputation of a school. That is not the case. Please, for the love of whatever you consider holy, look somewhere other than US News. But when you're looking at arts programs, you should definitely look at the faculty and their reputation in that program. Look at the track record for the area you're interested in studying. Look for experienced, well-connected faculty, professors who are active professionals or who were active professionals who may be retired. That can really enhance your training. It also often comes with greater connections in your related arts fields, arts industry. The reputation in your fields can actually indicate a lot of the networking opportunities as well. And so asking the art, music, drama teachers, about the alumni of the program, and about the careers of the people who are in your arts discipline can really make a difference when you're looking at different arts programs at different schools. And also, super important, look at the style that school typically emphasizes. And you can find that by way of the faculty. What are the styles that the faculty specialize in? Because not all music programs have a lot of jazz emphasis. Not all arts programs have a lot of sculpture emphasis. I'm running out of enough specific arts for me to continue this, but look into the specific niches of the faculty at the program you're looking at to see if their emphasis, their styles, and their philosophy match your interests. One of the other things that you should really think about are the facilities and resources. Look at the studios, look at the practice rooms, look at the theaters, look at the concert halls, look at the galleries, look at the equipment. Check out all the things that you'll need, all the things you'll be using. I say this as I mentioned at the top, I was a competitive ballroom dancer in college. And I went to a school that had really, really, really great dance studios, except for one in the Branford basement that was terrifying. And it was so far underground that no one ever had cell service, so we could have really died down there and no one would have known. But aside from that one terrifying dance studio, the practice rooms were great, the theaters were great. I went to a school that drew in a lot of theater students because there were so many theaters that they could put up little plays in, or they could put up their pieces in. It is really important to think about the access you'll have to the performance spaces you need, the resources you will literally need to be an art student. If for people who are interested in the visual arts, like check out literal studio space. If you're looking at photography, check to see if they have high quality labs. Do they have dark rooms? Do they have digital labs? Do they have a variety of cameras that you can rent out? For music and drama, again, look at practice rooms. Everybody, honestly, look at practice rooms. Look at the performance venues. Also, look at their performance record, their performance calendar. Is there a lot of performance happening at the school? Because if you're interested in music or drama, but there's not a lot of performance happening on campus, you may not actually have much opportunity to perform while you're there. It's really important to think about not just how you'll hone your craft in class, but how you'll really practice your craft outside of class. And then whenever you're looking at things as an undergrad, I say, always check to see how accessible the things you're seeing are to undergrads, especially when you're looking at universities that facilitate graduate and undergraduate study. You should always check to see what's available to undergrads specifically, because it is not uncommon for things to be more specifically focused for graduate students. So you should always check that out. And then check the location in the art scene. Location can be especially important for art students. That's why most of the top film schools, surprise, surprise, are in Los Angeles. It's because most of the film in the country happens in Los Angeles, or historically. Then it moved to Atlanta. Now it's moving to London. We'll see what happens. But historically, film has happened in LA. So lots of the best film schools are in LA. And then we have NYU in New York. Look at the location. Look at the art scene. Urban centers, New York, LA, Chicago, do tend to provide a lot more access to theaters, galleries, music venues, internships, all the things that are related to the arts. So those do tend to be some of the locations that are best for arts, but they're not always the best. I say this creative writing, for example, which does sort of fall under the arts category. One of the best creative writing programs is at Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. And I now owe Ohio an apology for what I said at the top of this. I'm not going to give that apology, but I do owe it. But Ohio is one of the best places in the entire country you can go to study writing. Look at reputation, look at the track record, and look at the location to see, are there industry connections you're looking for that are very location dependent? Luckily, writing isn't location dependent. The internet is the internet. So I'll take that apology back from Ohio. But a rural small town campus might offer a more insular focused environment, but that might also mean that you have less pre-professional opportunities. That said, it's a matter of which experience are you looking for. Think about which setting will inspire you more, which will benefit you, and which one you prefer, because it's also about doing well while you're there and enjoying your experience. And then I've sort of wrapped these into the other ones, but again, think about the performance and the exhibition opportunities. check, like you can basically check the performance schedules at most schools. I really recommend looking into that if you're into any of the performance ones, any of the performing arts. And then if you're interested in visual arts, I recommend that you see, like, are there exhibition opportunities? Are there lots of museums or studios or showrooms that are putting up student work? And then check class size and community. Especially if you're at conservatories, check to see how dominant your specific discipline is at the conservatory. And then at universities that aren't conservatories, I typically recommend check to see if there is a decent number of other artistically inclined students at your school. Some schools are artsier than others. Tufts, for example, has a huge number of art students, in large part because they have a dual degree program with the School of Museum of Fine Arts. Carnegie Mellon has a huge music population. The Carnegie Mellon School of Music was originally one of the most famous parts of the university. Oberlin College in also Ohio. I should be nicer to Ohio, God. Okay, cool. Anyways, Oberlin College, which is also in Ohio, huge music population. They actually have an undergraduate conservatory of music. So check to see if there are artsy students at your school. Some schools are artsy in general, like NYU. Some schools aren't super artsy, like Vanderbilt. And some schools are artsy, but in a specific discipline. So that is also something that you should check out. And candidly, you could typically look that up on a website like Niche, Niche, N-I-C-H-E. If you go to Niche, you can actually find out how many students typically graduate each year in each discipline. So you can find that out. I know that was a lot of info on the key factors to consider, but I do think that that's one of the really important things to focus on when you're thinking about making such a big decision. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are the specifics of the application. And I'll run through this one a little bit more quickly. One of the main things is check portfolio requirements. Portfolio requirements are more common for visual arts and design programs, but they also are often required for performing arts like music, dance, theater, and they're especially common for film programs. Film programs will almost always request a portfolio. That's a lie, not almost always, but they will very, very frequently request a portfolio of film work. And one reason that it's really important to check the portfolio requirements is that portfolio requirements differ both by discipline and by school/program. So you can't just have one portfolio necessarily that you send to everywhere. It's really important that once you decide you're going to pursue an arts degree, whether at a conservatory or at a university, that you start checking the specific portfolio requirements of each of the schools that you're planning to apply to, because they're often very different. For film, for example, Dodge, the Chapman School of Film, Dodge, one of the best film schools in the country, requires a 2-minute piece that can have no dialogue in it. While USC requires a different portfolio, not just if you're going to the film school, but depending on exactly what your major is at the film school. There's a different portfolio requirement for production versus for direction versus for cinema studies versus for DART, which is design, animation, and R&T, because I don't remember them right now, something in technology. But it's the portfolio requirements are very different, not just by school, but even by your specific program in the school. Sometimes they require a piece of media that you produce. Sometimes there's a writing sample even. Some theater programs will require that you submit a script that you've written. Some will require a self-tape. It's really, really important that you early on start building a portfolio, but also know that you may need to be flexible and you may need to produce new pieces for a specific portfolio that you're working on. But for everyone, I say, start curating your best work so you can showcase your range and your skill. I often also say, I recommend attending at least one National Portfolio Day event for like at anywhere you can find one, just so you can get early feedback. And just as a piece of advice, I tell every student I encounter who's interested in an arts program that requires a portfolio, start talking to your arts instructor, whether that's an arts instructor at your school or if you take private art lessons, or talk to an expert in your field about the fact that you need a portfolio and tell them you need honest advice. You need it from somebody who is an expert in that field. And one thing to keep in mind about portfolio requirements, especially because there are some universities that will allow students to submit a portfolio, even if they're not applying for the arts discipline. So lots of highly selective schools, so Yale, Stanford, MIT are three that come to mind. they will accept arts portfolios from students who aren't applying to arts majors, just because they show that extra skill. But one thing to keep in mind when you're applying for, so if you're applying to one of those three schools as an art major, the art major doesn't actually require a portfolio at those two schools, but it's allowed for any student. But one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at universities that offer arts programs is if the portfolio isn't required, you should take a second to double check, is the portfolio going to be reviewed by the admissions staff, or is it going to be reviewed by the arts faculty in your discipline? That's typically only something you need to look at when it's an optional portfolio, but I very heavily recommend checking that. And that will always be available on the school's website. You can just look up. So the three I mentioned, by the way, Yale, MIT, Stanford, you can literally Google MIT optional arts portfolio, and then it'll give you all the information about how it's reviewed. Same thing if you look it up at Yale and Stanford. And on Yale's website, they actually tell you, be careful, only submit this portfolio if you are demonstrating above average talent, because this is not going to be reviewed by the admission staff, by which they mean it's not being reviewed by regular people. It is being reviewed by the faculty of the arts discipline you submit. So they're going to be judging you on a professional standard. So that's one thing to check out. Now, when it comes to auditions, typically for the performing arts like music, dance, theater, same thing there. Those also have, they typically require an audition. Sometimes the auditions are self-taped, sometimes they're in person. They vary widely by school and by discipline. You may need to prepare a monologue for acting. You may need to prepare songs, singing for musical theater, dance routines, instrumental pieces. But even then, it's often different by school. So you can't just have your one self-tape that was perfect that you and your ballet instructor choreographed. Many schools will require some schools actually require a specific routine that you have to tape. Some schools will require a specific length that you have to worry about, whether it's dance or music. Some will require pieces in very specific styles or a specific mix of styles, which is very common for music. They'll often want you singing in 2 or 3 different styles with different lengths, etc. Sometimes they'll actually give you a specific song you're supposed to sing or a specific song you're supposed to play. Plan your audition and portfolio pieces well in advance and practice them extensively, ideally with a teacher or a coach, because admissions is often heavily based on your performance. There are often students who academically are very, very well qualified for programs, but whose performance is not up to par and they don't get in. And candidly, I have seen several students who academically are not what I would consider qualified for certain schools, who find their way at like a UCLA or an NYU or University of Michigan because they applied for an audition or portfolio heavy admissions major or program. So those are really important to think about. Typically when it comes to auditions, by the way, I do say when it's possible, auditioning in person can be to your benefit because there's a little bit of the social aspect of the audition, but do know that that's not necessarily required everywhere. So keep that in mind. There's often interviews and essays related. The essays are very, very common for universities or liberal arts colleges with arts disciplines because they also want to check to make sure that the student can hold their own in a traditional classroom as well as in their arts discipline. But even a lot of conservatories will require them. One of the most common essays is what I like to call the artist statement or the artist statement of purpose. It tends to be just like why do you love art? How are you going to change the world with your art? What are you going to art in the world? But the specific wording of them changes every once in a while, but they do basically boil down to why art? Why are you doing art in college? Let us know. Again, getting back to USC, the film school, one of their prompts historically, I haven't actually checked to see if it's the prompt this year, but for the film production major, which is the most selective major at USC Film, the film production major at USC has a 0.7% acceptance rate. One of their questions is, what types of stories do you want to tell? So even the essays differ from school to school. So again, you can't really think that you're going to recycle everything. And then, of course, there are all the standard parts of the college application. There's your transcript, there are the test scores if they're required, there are letters of recommendation. For art students, you'll actually typically have an extra layer of recommendations because you'll have the standard recommendations from your teachers, and then it's very, very, very common for art students to also need a recommendation from somebody in your discipline. And typically you're submitting those on what's called Slide Room, not always, but often on Slide Room. So you heard Belinda talking about the Common App earlier, which is the way that most applications in the United States are submitted. But there's an additional platform specifically for portfolios called Slide Room, which is linked to the Common App. And that's where your arts recommendations will typically go. Or sometimes your arts recommendations will actually go directly onto the school website, but the website of the school you're applying to. After you submit your main application, then you get a little separate portal for admissions where you then upload additional information. That happens pretty frequently at DePaul, for example. And again, remember, when you're applying to a liberal arts college or a university that has an arts program you're looking at, those will typically place similar emphasis on grades and test scores, if the test scores are required, in addition to your audition or portfolio. There's some understanding that there may be greater talent in one area may make up for lower talent in another. It depends on what that specific school's prioritization of portfolio and talent over academics is. Which brings me to one of my next big points, how to stand out, and some tips for how to like really, really make yourself look like a competitive or a stronger applicant. I'm going to take a quick water break. One of the main things is, just like in every part of every college application, you should really focus on showcasing your unique artistic voice. Whether it's in your audition or in your portfolio, present something that shows who you are as an artist. I mentioned earlier that some schools will have a specific routine or a specific piece of choreo that you need to do or a specific song you're supposed to sing. But as every artist knows, everything is up for a little bit of interpretation, a little bit of personalization. It doesn't matter if you're performing Mozart, there are interpretations of Mozart. Don't get too interpretive with Mozart, but I think you get the point. When you get to pick for yourself, don't choose the standard piece that you think they want. If you're doing a monologue, pick a monologue that you really connect with. If you get to choose your own music pick a piece of music that you really, really connect with, a piece that you really think this will show off both my specific style and my specific talents. If you are a visual artist, choose at least one piece of art that you just loved creating. Maybe it's not the one that won you the most awards, though. If there's one that won you the most awards, you should probably include it. But authenticity really, really stands out on these applications because they're looking for, these art schools are trying to train the next generation of great artists. So they're not just looking for someone who can do the same thing that's been done over and over again. They're looking for something unique. They're looking for something that really stands out and that's truly authentic. Again, pay attention to the guidelines. Follow the rules, always meet the requirements, but while staying within the requirements, let your specific artistry kind of shine. And I can't stress this enough, prepare early. I've talked about how there are different portfolio requirements at different schools for different majors. I've seen so many times that a kid who's applying for roughly the same major at a bunch of different schools still has to produce like 7 completely separate portfolios because of the different requirements at the different schools. I will say that's less common for the visual arts like painting, drawing, but for film, for dance, for music, for musical theater, it is very common for students to have 5 or more different portfolios because of the different constructions of portfolios for different schools. And especially when it comes to auditions, those audition pieces are often released pretty far in advance, and they look at them very, very closely. So you don't want to be out of practice with you don't want to be practicing your audition piece for the first time on short notice. So you want to prepare and practice early, and get feedback. Get feedback from somebody who knows your discipline, knows it intimately, and knows it on an expert level. No offense to parents, but parents are not, unless your parent happens to be an amazing artist in your discipline, but even then, probably not your parents, because your parents love you. You are your parents' special snowflake. They will not be harsh enough. They will not be objective enough. Ask a teacher, ask your music instructor. get a truly objective opinion, get objective feedback, or as close to objective as possible, and practice. Also mind audition etiquette. Like, do mock auditions with your teachers if you can, and practice the entirety of the audition, from entering the room and introducing yourself to performing to thanking the auditionees, auditors, that's the word. Look, you really want to practice the being professional and being poised. If you're doing self-tapes, make sure that you actually have a decent setup for self-tapes. I'm not saying you need to rent out studio space and have a professional camera team, but maybe don't do your self-tape in the middle of a crowded cafe, or don't do it at the coffee table while your siblings and parents run around behind you. And again, I truly, if you can make it to a portfolio day, a national portfolio day, those tend to be pretty great. And I say have backup pieces prepared if you can. Again, just because for music and for the arts, if you can prepare them in advance, those backup pieces can be really, really helpful, because you may need to swap things out. I know that I may be making things sound more stressful, but stay calm, be yourself. Theoretically, you're talented. Let that talent show, and let your genuine interest show, your genuine interest in the field, in the school, in what you're looking at. Let me see. Right. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is some information on financial aid and scholarships. So these kind of run the gamut. I'll actually go a little bit out of order from what you see on the screen, just to make things simpler. The first thing I'll talk about is need-based financial aid. That's actually totally separate from all things talent, all things art. That's just pretty much straightforward. It's you do the FAFSA, maybe you do the CSS profile. But it's need-based aid based on income, assets, family finances. And that's pretty much the same for art students as it is for every student. I typically recommend that everyone fill out the FAFSA. I recommend fill out the FAFSA. Even students, parents, families who are convinced that they won't qualify for need-based aid, I recommend that you fill out the FAFSA, especially because there are some colleges that require the FAFSA before they'll award merit-based scholarships. I recommend everyone fill out the FAFSA, and I recommend you do it on time. I recommend you do it on time, provided that the FAFSA itself is on time, unlike it was last year. Like, even conservatories and art institutes participate in federal aid, so you can get grants, work study, and everything like that based on financial need, which requires the FAFSA in those cases. Some colleges even have special endowments to support arts majors. So even if you're not going to a conservatory, but if you're going to at WashU in St. Louis, for example, has special endowments specifically for students in creative writing disciplines. So Tufts has special scholarships. So this will get to the merit base, but there are special scholarships for art students at some schools, even if it's not an art school. So that gets to the talent-based scholarships. Many colleges and conservatories offer merit scholarships for really gifted art students. Sometimes those are based on the strength of your audition. Sometimes they're based on your portfolio. Sometimes they are just based on your academic record. Sometimes they're even based on an optional submission. So I mentioned WashU in St. Louis, for example. There's actually, even if you're not necessarily pursuing a creative writing degree, you can win the creative writing scholarship at WashU in St. Louis by submitting pieces of your creative writing. Same thing with Tufts. Even if you're not necessarily going to pursue the music major, there are music talent scholarships at Tufts that you can win based on a portfolio that you submit for that scholarship. So there are scholarships for really talented musicians or for really talented artists, sometimes even if you're not going into that arts discipline. But now for those of you who are going to the arts discipline, you should absolutely check to see if there are scholarships for your discipline. And then there are tons of external scholarships these that are targeted at students in the fine and performing arts. There are national foundations, and there are competitions like the National Young Arts Foundation, the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. There's the Young Musicians Foundation. There are tons of art scholarships, music scholarships, theater scholarships. There are competitions and awards that you can often enter. And then check around your area, because it's not uncommon for local community arts councils or local community, like community museums or local arts foundations, to have scholarships or funds that they provide for graduating high school students interested in the arts. For art students, I do typically say be very proactive in looking those out, because a combination of small scholarships can add up, and there do tend to be a lot of small scholarships available for students interested in the arts. And then I say look at assistantships and work study. For art students, you can often get a position like you can get ensemble jobs. You can be a gallery assistant. You can work in a theater shop. So you can get small jobs that typically pay pretty well. Student jobs, work study jobs tend to pay pretty well, and they can be related to your field. They don't have to be related to your industry. You might get a job in the dining hall of the library or something, but those can be really helpful for helping you fund your education. And they're not necessarily scholarships, but they do often come with a pretty big financial benefit, because they do tend to pay very well. And for art students, a lot of colleges are really, really good at helping those work study positions be related to your fields and help you get relevant experience. So it's kind of a win-win. And then one just piece of advice I typically give to art students is budget for arts expenses. There tend to be lots of additional costs related to studying the arts. Buying and or repairing instruments. For dancers, you're going to run through your, like for a ballerina, you're going to run through those ballet shoes so frequently, especially because you start with each pair of shoes by destroying them. So like you'll have your art supplies, you'll have travel for auditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So keep in mind that there are additional costs that come with being an art student typically. So when you're looking at the finances, I also recommend check to see if your school offers grant or support for the extra expenses, because that's not uncommon. But like many things, you have to ask. Closed mouths don't get fed. Some programs even have like instrument loan programs or supply grants, or like if you're in film, lots of schools will loan out equipment. So you don't have to buy your own camera. You don't have to buy your own rigging. They rent those out at the school. You can check them out from the library. And when it comes to planning for the finances of applying, because applications cost money and auditions, even for schools that say auditions are in person, I do sometimes recommend check to see if they'll allow remote auditions or waivers, because it's not uncommon for schools to offer those either. So the moral of the story is that there's a great diversity of every part of the process and every part of the experience for art students. There's so many different types of degrees you can get. There's so many ways that you can pursue any of those degrees, whether it's at a conservatory or at a liberal arts college or at a large university that has arts programs, or even an art school at the university. And then there are tons of different ways to pay for it, tons of different priorities to have. But that's kind of the big overview of all things there. So I will jump into some Q&A in a second, but before I jump into the Q&A, I'm going to hand things back to Belinda, and then I will take a moment to come in and answer some of your questions.
Hello. Oh my gosh, Christopher, thank you so much. That was awesome. Of course, I would expect nothing less. So before we dive into the Q&A, and by the way, we have some awesome questions. Thank you very much for submitting those. Just want to tell you a little bit more about Collegewise. We have had a couple of people asking to learn a little bit more about how we support families and how they can get in touch with us if they are interested. So I will quickly spend 1 minute wrapping up there, and then we can get back to answering your questions. So, of course, you've heard a lot of helpful insights today, but maybe you're sat there feeling a little bit overwhelmed and wondering, okay, but I actually have to do this. What does this all mean for me specifically? And if that's you, that's okay. That's really what Collegewise is here for. As I mentioned before, we have been doing this work for 26 years now, actually, and we've helped thousands of families navigating this journey in that time, including lots and lots of students who are pursuing the arts. So as an organization, we really strongly believe in removing the stress from the process, creating a safe space so that students and families can tackle the process really confidently, and to take the pressure off parents and guardians suddenly feeling like they need to be this admissions expert. So what people like Christopher do at Collegewise and 100 of our other amazing counselors is they really help your family to press pause on all that noise so that we can help make your student super confident, help them make intentional choices based on who they are, their strengths, their interests, and their goals. And so that they can build applications and portfolios that reflect themselves in a really authentic and powerful way. So as I mentioned at the start, we support students right from middle school all the way through to submitting their application on every aspect of the college admissions process that you can think of. So if you are interested in learning more about working with Collegewise, in a second, a QR code is going to pop up. But before that, I am just going to launch a quick poll as well. So you can either scan the QR code and also answer this quick poll. The purpose of this is to help us guide the right information to you. So if you are interested in booking a complimentary meeting with one of our college advisors to learn more about working with a counsellor like Christopher, then you can select A. If you're maybe not sure yet, but you'd like to understand a little bit more about Collegewise, you can select B. Select C if you just want to check out our free resources, and we will send you a couple of links and some more information. If that is you, we love that. We are happy to send as many free resources out as we can to help make your journey as stress-free as possible. And finally, select D if you're a counsellor or an educator and you'd like more information about how we can support your school. Okay, remember to click submit. I'm going to leave it up for another 10 seconds. All right, perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, so on this slide, we do have a QR code. So if you didn't get time to complete the poll, that's fine. If you'd like to learn more about working with us, you can scan there. All right, let's dive into the questions. The first question we have is, what jobs can you get with a BFA?
So there are a lot of jobs you can get with a BFA. One thing I'll clarify is that a BFA that doesn't actually clarify the discipline. So you can get a BFA in music, you can get a BFA in acting, you can get a BFA in theater, you can get a BFA in art. But I will still answer the question as broadly as I can. BFA jobs are still very, very broad. Somebody with a BFA in performing arts can be a professional artist. You can be an actor, you can be a dancer, a musician, a choreographer, a theater director, a stage manager, that's still working in the arts. Graphic design and illustrating, fashion, textile, and jewelry design. I live in Los Angeles. I have many friends who are fashion designers or who work at major fashion houses. I saw another question about degrees you can get or jobs you can get with a degree in creative writing. Who do you think writes every TV show or movie that you've ever watched that's not produced by Tyler Perry has a team of writers? Tyler Perry writes it all by himself on planes. You can tell that's why they're so bad. How to try to get back on that boat. But there's so much that you could do with creative writing. There's writing for film and TV. There's writing for media. There's creative writers often write for magazines, write for newspapers. You can go into journalism with a degree in creative writing. You can get into PR. Every time somebody has to release their iOS press release to apologize, their PR person is probably involved. There are speech writers who do creative writing, like the people who write for comedy. There's freelance writing. There's so many PR, lots of people who do some marketing things, especially the large form marketing or the writing style marketing, have degrees in writing. There's also there's ghost writing for novels. But all this to say, a BFA still has tons of job opportunities. There's teaching, there's getting a job at a university, lots of UX designers. So working in tech, lots of UI and UX designers at big tech companies are people with BFAs or with arts degrees.
Okay, amazing, thank you. So somebody is asking for tips for last minute creating a portfolio. They only just started pursuing the arts and they don't have anything yet.
I recommend starting by identifying what are the portfolio requirements at the schools you're most interested in. And then what I would do is I would kind of cross-check to see what are the things you can do that would hit as many of the requirements as possible at the same time? That way, like, because if you have a short amount of time, I recommend essentially looking for the most efficient way to meet the most requirements you can in a short period of time. I'm not sure which art you're interested in, if it's film or if it's visual arts, but you probably don't have time to create a lot of pieces either way. So I would prioritize, look at what they are and think, what are pieces I can create that'll, like, you may still have to create multiple pieces, but what are pieces I can create that hit as many of these requirements as possible so I can minimize the number of pieces I need to create.
All right, thank you. So somebody else is asking for tips for creating a portfolio audition tape, music portfolio in particular.
Find somewhere quiet to do it. Typically, I would say like if you can, just find a practice room at either your school, or if you can like empty out like an area of your house that has good, like house or apartment that has good sound. But typically, I say try and see if you can borrow a practice room at school or at wherever you take your music lessons. That's really big. Camera quality isn't a huge thing. You're not being judged on whether or not you. Granted, every teenager I've met is a world-class video editor somehow. I don't know when you all learned that, but they're not judging you based on your. Now you said music, so you're not film. If it's film, yes, they are judging you based on your film quality, based on your directing and your editing. But if it's for music, they're just focused on the music. It doesn't matter if it was filmed on a potato. It's really just make sure you're somewhere where there's not a lot of sound interference. That's my biggest piece of advice. Oh, and it should be very careful to check what the rules about accompaniment are for music. If you're singing, there are often rules about you cannot be accompanied, or if you're accompanied, it can only be piano. And there are often rules about you cannot submit a piece where you're part of an ensemble singing. It has to be solo.
Okay, awesome. So somebody is asking, what is the best direction if I want a broader and cheaper, but not poor quality education that includes art, like studio art and figure drawing classes?
For the broader education, I would typically say look at a university that has a good arts program. Many state schools, because you said more affordable. Many state schools are great schools. Many state schools have very strong arts programs. I'm here in California. Some of the strongest arts programs in all of California are at the UC and Cal State system. UCLA is the #2 film school in the world. And so for people interested in film, UCLA is in-state tuition and #2 film school in the world, second to USC, which is the #1 film school in the world. USC does love lording that over UCLA because it's one of the few places they beat UCLA. But like state schools have great arts programs. And then you get the broader education with the rest of the degree.
Okay, so what extracurriculars, clubs, and roles stick out to art schools?
I would say it's two things. It's showing interest and dedication to your craft, and also showing that that's not the only thing about you. This is true for literally all students. You don't want to be a one-trick pony. Even if you're applying to a conservatory, you want to show that you've had at least one thought ever in your life that wasn't related to your discipline. You want to show that a lot of your thoughts are related to your discipline, but not every single one of them. So I definitely recommend that you spend time in extracurriculars that are related to your art, and then also spend time doing other things. And one major thing is, if it's ever possible, find a way to use your art to do something good. I've had students. I have a student she's an artist. She's going to Georgia Tech for engineering, but she was an artist. And one of the things she did with her art was she started painting portraits of the dogs at a local animal shelter. And it was a gift where every time somebody adopted a dog from that shelter, they got a portrait of the dog that was painted. So she was using her art to help do something good. Another artist student just had a mural go up in San Francisco on the local Chinese community center, because it's like she's a Chinese American who lives in San Francisco. And so she was doing it to help her community. I very much recommend finding a way to use your art to help something.
Okay, this may be the final question of the night. Is there a specific time of the year I should start applying to colleges, scholarships, creating my portfolio, etc.? I haven't started any of this, and I'm in my senior year.
Now, my answer is now. So my answer to you, person who asked the question, is now. But generally speaking, I would say for creating a portfolio, I recommend that you start thinking about your portfolio at the beginning of junior year if possible. And then the summer before senior year is often a time to really dive into the portfolio. And so lots of students create their portfolio, like create all the missing pieces of their portfolio over the summer. So I would say, like, I would really dive into looking at your portfolio right now. Applying for college, I typically say, Belinda knows this from me and from all the counselors we work with. I say start trying to finalize your list now or the end of junior year or the summer before senior year, and start working on your essays, ideally the summer before senior year. Some of those essays won't be available until around August, but August 1st is the big day where I definitely recommend you be started by August 1st. And then for scholarships, I say, as soon as you think about, not as soon as you think about, because some people will have freshmen and start applying for scholarships. No, but starting at the end of junior year, you can start looking for scholarships, because scholarship deadlines kind of run all over the place. Some scholarships are due between October and December of your senior year, and then some are due between January and March of your senior year. And then there are some that, like, they're basically 3 cycles of scholarships. There's the early winter scholarships due around December. There are the late winter ones that are due between January and March. And then there are the after you got into college scholarships that are basically now, like, it's when kids are scrambling. There's the most competition during the scramble, by the way. So between April and July of senior year to the summer after senior year, that's like round 3, but that's like clearing in the UK. It's a little bit more hectic to get scholarships then. I typically say October through March is when you really want to focus on scholarships, because that's when there are more of them and when there's a little bit less competition.
Okay, thank you so much. I wish we could get all of your questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to yours. If you are interested in learning more about working with Collegewise, you can address some of these things in your free consultation, and we will do our best to get you some answers. And then, of course, you would be paired with a counsellor like Christopher, who has a lot of expertise in this area, to be able to answer everything for you. Okay. With that, I want to say thank you to Christopher. Thank you to all of you tonight. And I'm going to pass back to Candice to close us out.
Thank you so much, Christopher and Belinda. Your insights are so valuable, and I know it really helps students think about this during such an overwhelming time. They're starting to explore their options for their future. So we really appreciate you being here with us. One last item before we say goodbye. When our webinar ends, there will be a survey that pops up. We'd really appreciate it if you could take 5 minutes to let us know how we did and how we can best support you in the future. This is a webinar that is new for ACT, and we really want to support our creative students. So I would love to see your feedback. Thank you so much for attending. And this webinar will be sent to you via email. I had a lot of questions about that. It will also be posted on the My Journey page at ACT. Thank you.